They were never supposed to feel it, not the lingering glances, not the unspoken words, not the quiet gravity that seemed to pull two people together even in silence. And yet, somehow, they did. In a world obsessed with noise, headlines, interviews, viral clips, there exists a deeper kind of truth, one that doesn't rely on what is heard or even fully seen. It lives in gestures, in pauses, in the way two people share space as if it were their own private universe. And for years, that is exactly how fans have described the connection between Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza. This is not just another story about romance rumors. This is about something far more elusive, something that even those who cannot hear or see in the conventional sense have claimed to understand. Coerced. From the moment Alden and Maine first appeared together on screen, there was an undeniable spark. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, it didn't demand attention, it simply existed. Their chemistry, often described as effortless, became the foundation of one of the most beloved on screen partnerships in Philippine entertainment. But beyond the scripted lines and rehearsed scenes, fans began to notice something else, something quieter, a glance that lingered just a second too long, a smile that seemed to say more than words ever could, a comfort in each other's presence that felt real. For many, these were just subtle details, but for some, particularly fans who experienced the world differently, these moments spoke volumes. The perspective. Few talk about. Among the most heartfelt narratives surrounding Alden and Maine's connection are those coming from members of the deaf and visually impaired community. Without relying on dialogue or auditory cues, these fans focus on body language, energy, and emotional presence. And what they've observed over the years has led to a powerful conclusion. What they have cannot be faked. It's a perspective that strips away the noise of showbiz speculation and focuses purely on what can be felt. And in doing so, it raises an intriguing question. If a connection can be recognized without words or sound, does that make it more real? Between reality and rumor. Of course, both Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza have maintained that their relationship is grounded in deep friendship, mutual respect, and shared history. They've navigated fame together, supported each other's individual journeys, and grown into their own identities beyond their once inseparable pairing. Yet the fascination with their connection has never truly faded. Why? Because some stories refuse to be confined to clear definitions. Fans continue to revisit old clips, interviews, and candid moments, not just to relive nostalgia, but to search for something deeper, a truth that perhaps was never meant to be loudly koshet, but quietly understood. The power of subtlety. In an industry where love stories are often dramatized and amplified, Alden and Maine's dynamic stands out for its restraint. There are no grand declarations, no headline-grabbing confirmations, no scripted fairy tale endings. And yet, that's exactly what makes it compelling. It invites interpretation. It leaves room for imagination. It allows people to feel rather than be told what to believe. For the deaf and visually impaired fans who have shared their perspectives, this subtlety is not a limitation, it's a strength. It transforms the connection into something more universal, something that transcends traditional ways of experiencing a story. A bond that endures. Years have passed, careers have evolved, and both stars have taken different paths, but the emotional imprint of their partnership remains. Whether seen as a beautiful friendship, a missed opportunity, or a love story that exists somewhere in between, one thing is clear. It mattered. It still matters. And perhaps that's the real story. Not whether they were ever officially together, but how their connection continues to resonate across different audiences, experiences, and perspectives. Final reflection. The truth you don't hear, not all are spoken, not all connections are defined, and not all love stories need confirmation to be felt. For Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza, the real magic may lie in what was never fully explained, because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that don't rely on sound or sight, but are understood anyway. Tash, echoes in silence, imprints in memory. What makes the connection between Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza so enduring isn't just what people saw years ago, it's how those moments continue to live on. Clips resurface, old interviews trend again. A simple throwback photo can ignite thousands of reactions in minutes. But it's not just nostalgia driving this, it's something deeper, something unfinished. For many fans, especially those who rely less on spoken words and more on emotional cues, these fragments feel like pieces of a story that never truly ended, only paused. The language of presence. There's a kind of language that doesn't require sound. It exists in proximity, how close two people stand without realizing it, in timing, how naturally they respond to each other without hesitation, in stillness, the comfort of not needing to fill every silence. Observers have pointed out how, even in crowded rooms or busy scenes, Alden and Maine often seem to move in sync as if guided by an unspoken rhythm. These are not things easily scripted. They're not moments that can be convincingly rehearsed over and over again. They either happen or they don't. And when they do, people notice. When absence speaks louder. Perhaps one of the most compelling aspects of their story is what happened after. When the constant collaboration slowed down, when the shared screen time became rare, when both stars began focusing on their own separate paths, the noise faded, but the curiosity didn't. In fact, for some, it grew stronger. Because sometimes absence doesn't weaken a story, it sharpens it. It forces people to reflect, to remember, to reinterpret what they once saw with fresh eyes. And in that reflection, many began to see things they hadn't fully understood before. Different paths, same respect. Today, both Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza have evolved far beyond the pairing that once defined a generation of fans. They've taken on new roles, explored different creative directions, built identities that stand firmly on their own. And yet, despite the distance in their professional paths, there remains a consistent thread: respect. There has never been bitterness in how they speak about each other. No public fallout, no dramatic unraveling. Just a quiet acknowledgement of a shared past that clearly meant something to both of them. And sometimes that kind of respect says more than any confirmation ever could. The fans who still believe every great story has its keepers, and in this case, they are the fans who continue to believe that what Alden and Maine shared was more than just coincidence or chemistry. Among them are voices that don't rely on traditional ways of experiencing media. Fans who interpret emotion through movement, through expression, through the smallest of details that others might overlook. For these fans, the connection was never about what was said. It was about what was felt, and feelings once formed don't simply disappear. A story without an ending. The truth is, not every story gets a clear resolution. Some are left open, unfinished, not because they lacked meaning, but because they contained too much of it to be easily defined. The connection between Alden and Maine exists in that space, not confirmed, not denied, just remembered. And perhaps that's why it continues to resonate. Because in a world that constantly demands answers, there's something strangely beautiful about a story that allows you to decide what it means. Final words: what remains? Years may pass, new projects may come and go, different chapters will continue to unfold. But somewhere, in the quiet corners of memory and emotion, the story of Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza remains untouched. Not because it was loud, not because it was defined, but because it was felt, even by those who never needed to hear a word or see it clearly to understand it.